Hello and welcome to Software Testing Guide by Jamil. And today's topic is black box testing. So what is black box testing? Black box testing, also known as behavioral testing. And for this black box testing, no knowledge of internal code structure is required, so you don't need to know how the code works. That is for the white box testing, uh, which is carried out by the developers mainly. So, and you don't need no knowledge of implementation details, or internal path of the code or how system works internally. And it's entirely based on the requirement and spec. Uh, so at this requirement level, when the BA writes the requirements, as a tester, we would create valid and invalid acceptance criteria against the requirement. And all the outputs of these tests are which are determined by a tester. So all these, again, valid and invalid inputs, and what are the expected outputs for each acceptance criteria. Based on this, we create tests. So, and then obviously execute these tests against this actual developed system. And then once these are executed, we would compare the actual output with expected output which we created earlier from the acceptance test criteria as test cases. So, type of black box testing. There are three main type of black box testing. There's plenty more, but I'll talk about three main ones, which are, first one is functional testing. So this is related to functional requirements, which are again written at the start of the system. How the system works, so the business requirements are turned into functional requirement, and this functional testing again performed by a tester. And then there is a non-functional testing, which is not related to requirement but more around the load testing. For example, how much load it could take at a time, how many users can handle, as well as performance, how fast, how quick it works, usability around the system, and there's many more which we could non-functional testing which could be carried out depending on, again, certain system functionality. That's for example, web would require different type of non-functional testing, whereas desktop would require different type of non-functional testing. And another is regression testing, which is performed after the code fixes. So for example, during functional testing, there is a defect that's found, which has been fixed and put back into the system. So we would test that, yeah, it works, but then there would be a pack of regression tests which needs to be run against the system to make sure there isn't any impact on the existing code by this bug fix or defect fix that's been implemented. Okay, so black box testing techniques. There are many techniques, but I'll talk about the 5 here. First one is equivalence class testing. So equivalence is used to minimize the number of possible test cases to an optimum level while maintains reasonable test coverage. So I'll talk a bit more about it on its own topic, which I will share with you guys once the video has been created. Then there's boundary testing, which focuses on the boundary, which is to test the range of testing acceptable and unacceptable ranges of values by the system. So if you have, for example, you have a mortgage, which is minimum month is 60, maximum is 300. So your boundary would be, lower boundary would be 60 and upper boundary would be 300. So that would be acceptable, as well as in the middle you would try as well to make sure it works. And there would be a negative test, so that would be, for example, 59 just below the lower boundary and 301 just above the higher boundary. Then there's the decision table testing. My favorite technique, which I use quite often during testing. Um, it is like a matrix combination of actions and rules, which you define in a table format. Um, and you have an expected output, whether it's a successful or it's an error message, depending on set of actions performed by a user. So this could be example of a login system where you have a password, a user ID, correct user ID and correct user password. So it's a successful login. Then you could have a user ID, incorrect password, so it'll be an error message, or you could have a correct password, incorrect user ID. Again, it would be a error message, or you could have both user ID and a password incorrect, and it would be an error message. That's as an example. And then there's a state transition testing, which is similar to the decision table testing, but it's triggered by the changes to an input condition or changes of a state. So what comes in the previous state and what's in the next state, depending on that, it will give you an output. Rather than having a matrix, it's a one state to another state. So you perform one action, then you go to a different action, and the action decides the output. And then finally, you have the use case testing. Again, it's the process of testing business scenario or process flow. So you have an action, and then you have action between an actor and a system. So an actor is, for example, a person, and the system is, as an example, is ATM machine where user puts in a card and the user performs an action, which is to put in a card and then type in the PIN number. That's the action. Then system is the action. Is the PIN number correct? Right? If not, if it is, then it accepts it. If it isn't, it throws an error message, or it doesn't allow user to access the account. I will create videos on each of these techniques. So watch out for these videos. Watch out for these videos soon. Black box testing and software development life cycle. Requirements. Requirement is an initial stage for software development life cycle and normally performed by business analysts and would have an input from testers in terms of determining the acceptance criteria. So as a tester, you would work with the BA to create an acceptance criteria for requirements that is acceptable by the client as well. And then after that, we do test planning and analysis. So in this case, what type of testing will be applicable for the project, and the project plan is based on that project plan is created, and what kind of risk and mitigations are required. So that goes all into the planning and analysis part of the software development life cycle. Again, this could be covered later on, and it is quite a big subject on its own, test planning, and takes a lot of thought into that. The next stage of it is actually designing the test scripts and test cases, which are based on the requirements and the acceptance criteria. So each requirement will have an acceptance criteria. Based on the acceptance criteria, we would create test cases, which would have input and expected output for each test case, which will form a test script. Then once that is completed and accepted by all the stakeholders, then they would start execution of them tests. In this case, so we would execute each script, executing test cases at a stage, making sure all the acceptance criteria is fulfilled, and if there are any bugs, it needs to be fixed. Once it's fixed, it's retested, which goes through the bug life cycle. Again, it's no different to any functionality. It has a development estimation stage, development stage, And once it's built, it goes into the system testing or SIT testing, system integration testing. And then once it's completed, there might be a regression test required to make sure nothing has been broken. To wrap this up, as a tester, it is common form of testing which you will be performing using various types. So you got functional testings, non-functional testing, regression testing, as well as various techniques such as boundary testing, decision tables. For black box testing, you could also use automation tools such as Selenium, which is for the web testing. You got web testing, again functional testing. Also JMeter for non-functional testing, for performance load, and then you have a Postman, which is for the API testing, which can also be automated using command line, Newman command line. And hopefully there'll be more future tutorials coming up on black box testing in regards to techniques such as decision table, use case testing, equivalence testing, boundary testing. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the comment section, and do like this video and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to get the latest video. Thank you.